welcome to the Ultra Running Sam podcast. So quickly, our sponsors. We are proudly sponsored by Yugoku caps. You've seen me wearing them on the podcast. You can get the discount codes from me. Send me a message. I'll send them to you. They're floating around. We're also sponsored by Phoenix head torches. Same thing goes. If you're after a discount code, just get in touch. There are there on the web, but if you want them personally from me, I will send them to you. And also, finally, we are proudly sponsored by Home Trails. So Home Trails is my YouTube series interviewing famous trail runners from hopefully around the world at some point. In the UK at the moment, where we interview them on the trail in the home trails. You understand what it is, don't you? You've listened to the show. That's hopefully turning into a bit of a brand, so keep your eyes peeled for that. Okay, on with the actual show. Okay, so quick advert just here. So Ranger Ultras. So if you've been inspired by, the Spine race recently and you want a extended routes challenge, and obviously trying to get into the Spine race is difficult at the best of times, but if you want a local, friendly, great value for money, long trail experience, then Ranger Ultras offers he's got loads of races on. Stu Westfield's got loads of races on, but the one that we're doing an advert for is the Pennine Bridleway Trail Challenge. So the PB 270 is the full distance. So that is 168 miles, and it is Middleton Top to Kirkby Stevens. So 168 miles, 100 hours. This will be the third time that he's put the race on. There's also the shorter version, which is the PB 137. Now, for that one, it's got a 50-hour cut off, and you go from Hebden Hay to Kirkby Stevens. So it's, the Pennine Bridleway follows a similar route up the country as to the Pennine Way, but obviously it's more runnable trail. So if you don't fancy falling in a bog, this is the one for you. So there's still the same sort of great scenery, but more runnable trails. So if you fancy a challenge in April, so that takes place over the first week in April. So registration's on the 2nd of April, and the race starts on the 3rd of April. Is that the case with both races? Let's just have a quick look at the races. Yeah, first. So for the big one, you start on the 2nd. So race registration's on the 1st of April, April Fool's Day. Some people might say that you're a fool for doing such a long race. And you've got 100 hours. So you set off on the 2nd of April. So if you want to get your fix of a long trail, you want sort of a more budgetable race, but the same sort of views and the same sort of distances as the Spine, then this could be your gateway drug into the long stuff. So get in touch and we'll see if we can figure out with Stu whether there's some things we can do with discounts or anything that we can sort of figure out. But basically, this is the advert for it. So go and get your trail fix with Ranger Ultras in April with the PB 137 and the PB 270. Go, sign up now. Okay, yeah, we are recording, and I thought I'd hit record quick because we were having a golden conversation that I didn't want to miss on the recording about Alice. So, firstly, then, Alice Kershaw, welcome to the Ultra Running Sam podcast. Get the name right. We're trying to figure out how many podium places you've had at various Spine races over the years, and and naively, I knew that you'd won some of the races, but I hadn't realised just how many podiums you've been on the Spine race. It seems you're more obsessed with the Spine than I am.
I know. To be fair, I do worry that it's become an obsession now.
Yeah, right. Let's list them off then.
Oh,
So
do I
go.
have to list them, or do you gonna
Well,
list them?
I'll list them, but I'll get them in the wrong order, you see. So, So which would let's do it in chronologically then. What was your first winter? No, your first
So
podium at the Spine.
my first podium was my first spine race, which was the sprint. So it was the sprint in winter.
Winter sprint. So that would
Yeah.
have been, so what was that, 20 to winter of
I've,
20?
so I literally have the thing above my desk there. I think it was when it was the 10th anniversary of the spine. That's what I could see from here. So that must
Yeah,
have been
22 was that, or was that 21?
must have
Winter.
been 21, I
So the
think.
first, the very first sprint was in the summer of 21, wasn't it?
Oh,
So
so it must have been 22. Must have been the winter of 22 because it's confusing me because I've got a summer one in there as well. So it's no, I'm wrong. Oh my God, this is awful for people listening. It's four winter podiums. So that must make it 2021
yeah,
because I've done one every year.
yeah. It's hard, isn't it, when you're so good that you've forgotten how many races you've won.
That sounds atrocious for me, doesn't it?
But yeah, that's fair enough, isn't it? So you had a win at this at the sprint.
hmm
You had so you then had third place in the full summer Spine, yeah?
No, it was winter in the sprint, then it was second in the Challenger South in winter, and then in the same year, which is why it's confusing me, it was third in the full summer, and then it was second in the sprint in 2024, and then obviously first in Challenger South this year.
Amazing. So you've yeah, so you need to do Challenge North then, don't you?
I know. Do I need to collect them all? Is it like Pokemon?
I think yeah, and then you've got the new one, which is Sprint North as well now.
Yeah, that does look good. I like the idea of not being completely trashed on the Cheviets. I believe they're quite nice.
Yes, yeah, that is. I think that's the attraction of that new race that is obviously going to be happening summer, isn't it? First, yeah, the first one's
Yeah,
happening.
yeah.
That's the attraction, isn't it? Because I think no matter who you are, it like whether you're at the front on the podium or whether you're at the back, that part of the route for everybody is like a bit. I don't know because it is quite runnable, isn't it? There's a lot of that is runnable, isn't it? There's like flagstones
hmm
and there's bits. I mean, I even remember like running sections like on Challenger North, like when I was feeling like, when you have those moments where you just feel like, oh, I can run, I can do it. And
Yeah,
then
they get increasingly short those moments as the race goes on, doesn't it?
they
You
don't
get
last,
that brief thing.
they don't last very long, do they? No. Anyway, right. So you're I'd say you're a long time listener of the long
I
time
am.
podcast, aren't you? Yeah. And I always appreciate all of the extra hype that you give the podcast whenever I put anything on. So from a spine veteran like yourself, I appreciate all the listens and the bits of promo that you do for me inadvertently.
Anytime.
Brilliant. So does this feel weird to be on the podcast that you listen to?
It is quite weird. I think it's going to be weirder when I decide whether or not I listen back to this because usually it's one that I will listen to like every time there is an episode. So I will consider whether I can stand listening back to this or not
Yeah.
as we get to the end.
That's the funny thing, isn't it? I at first when I first started recording, I was like, oh, I'd like cringe when I'd like listen to the recordings back. And now I listen to absolutely everything that I record now. And that was to begin with, that was just to like make sure that there wasn't any like complete screw ups with like editing and stuff, if
Mm.
I did any editing at all. But then I think eventually I heard my own voice so much that I just became immune to it and it doesn't bother me now. So I can quite happily like listen because sometimes I'll listen back to a podcast of an interview I've done with somebody and I enjoy it because I'm listening to it as somebody would listen to it. And even though it's me asking the questions and I know what
Nice.
questions are coming up, I get to hear the answer better because half the time I'm like, not that I'm always thinking of the next question, but sometimes you'll get an answer and then it'll send you off in another direction or something.
hmm
And it's nice to be able to actually listen to somebody properly and hear the interview as everybody else hears it. If that doesn't sound too weird.
No, that sounds great. That makes a lot of sense. And I imagine you're also trying to like actually get, kind of really listen to them, like you say, because of the fact you're presumably thinking of what next question is coming up and kind of actually be able to take in what they're really saying.
Yeah, it's true. Very true. Right. Well, we didn't record this podcast to talk about me and this and this podcast. This is bit of a weird thing, isn't it? We're talking about the podcast during the podcast. Um, so obviously, being a listener to the podcast, you know the question. So the first question that everybody gets when they're a new interviewee on the podcast, it's the superhero question. So do I need to explain the superhero question to you?
I did know you were going to ask this, so this is like the origin story, isn't it? Of like, how did you end up here? Kind
Yeah.
of a question.
How did Alice Kershaw, what is your superhero origin story?
Yeah, so I mean, so I'm from the South Lakes originally, so I've always spent a lot of time outside in the hills. I love being outside. I hate being inside. Like that is my big thing. I always like being on the move. But I actually got into ultras in about 2019, so I can remember this because I've been doing a lot of long distance walking. I'd started doing running. I realized that running in hills is much more fun than running on tarmac. And one of my friends said, "Oh, you should sign up for an ultra. Come along. It's the Punk Panther events, which are the local one to me. Do an ultra called the Welcome Way." And I thought, in my mind, that's great. It must be really welcoming, which they are. But in my mind, I was like, so that must be an easy route. Great. Okay. That sounds fun. Good beginner ultra. Anyway, so we trained together. And then she didn't actually go and do the race because she was like, actually, it seems a bit hard. And I actually looked it up. The Welcome Way around here is a way. It's not, it's a lovely name for an ultra, but it's not necessarily like I would say they're a great first ultra company, but maybe it wouldn't be your first choice. It goes over quite a lot of the hills around here, and it's not to be sniffed at as an ultra. So I hadn't quite realised what I'd signed myself up to, and as it happened, they were a fantastic race company. I still do loads of Punk Panther races. They're brilliant. They were really welcoming. The whole thing was amazing. I realised that you didn't actually have to run the hills, and you could in fact just walk them while eating snacks, and then realised this is the ideal sport for me. I love walking, going interesting places, doing nice routes, chatting to people, and eating loads. So I was like, that's it. I found my sport. So once I'd kind of recovered from the horror of what it feels like after your first ultra, I just kind of kept going back and firstly with them and then looking for what other things were interesting routes. Like where is there somewhere that's worth, putting the effort in to kind of get around. So I've done some hard moors races on things like the Wolds Way and the Cleveland Way. And then obviously the spine races started coming up as a result of that because I was kind of like, okay, well, what races take part in ways? And I'd obviously seen Jasmine Paris do that amazing. Like I still have a screenshot. I remember like watching it on my phone in a hotel room because I was away for work and saw her finish that like, and I screenshot it the moment she like hit the wall, and I was like, oh my God, I can't imagine ever doing any of these, but that route looks incredible. So that kind of led me towards the kind of spine
Mm,
area of ultra racing.
yeah. So so that's quite a fast like sort of transition into doing really well at ultras, isn't it? So you sort of came into it in 2019 and then 2021 you were like
Mm.
on a podium in a major race. So do you feel like you were sort of always destined to be an ultra runner then? It was sort of part of your DNA then?
Probably not. And so one of the things I try not to think about too much, but I once came last in a half marathon when I lived in London, and I was so slow that they took away like everything. They left my medal in the grass, and they like took away like the finishing arch and all of that. So I never particularly thought of myself as like, oh wow, this is, running, that's where I'm going to kind of get anything out of. But what I did really like about it was the kind of managing yourself side, the, like I say, the atmosphere, the community, all the kind of, solving problems as you go along. So I think it was that I found particularly interesting. And I absolutely wasn't expecting to necessarily do well in it at all. But I kind of realized that my ability, like comfort with being outside and my ability to kind of handle myself in hills and mountains and bogs, which is particularly useful, came in handy, really. And I think probably some of my like mindset of like I really genuinely enjoy doing this stuff also helps.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. I suppose you can kind of grow to love a sport, can't you, as you get into.
Mm.
Do you think you sort of started to sort of because that's got like going from like last place in a race to then like winning ultras. That's like, it's literally the opposite ends of the scale, isn't it? So
Mm.
at any point did you sort of when you were first starting to do trail running and stuff ever think, well, I'm never going to be any good at this because of, coming last in a race?
I mean, I did a bit, and then I did fell races where, like, I am always in like the lower end of fell races, but they're so much fun. And I was like, it doesn't actually matter. Like, no one cares, you know. If you do a fell race, and I was like, what was your time on that? Because it's meaningless. And things like ultras, I knew, like, having seen like some races around here in particular, but things like the Spy as well, everyone gets celebrated. It's doing it most of the time. No one, you know, nicest possible way. No one cares who's on the podium. It's just every single story of people doing it and getting to the end is the really big thing. So there was a lot less pressure because just completing it is great. And no one, someone might ask you 5K PB. No one's going to ask you, your 50K like on a different route every time
Mm.
in different weather every time PB. The pressure is off because it's almost completely meaningless because, for example, my Challenger South win was 6 hours slower than my Challenger South second. Like, it's irrelevant how long you spend out there. It's about the experience. So that took the pressure off. Whereas it felt like with things like half marathons and 10Ks, it's not about the experience. It's not about enjoying it. It's a lot more about like getting that time, hitting those paces. And that just doesn't appeal. So I think they were very different ends of running full stop, actually.
Yeah, that's true. And your sort of like approach to ultra running is you always seem like super happy to be like involved with anything to do with ultra running. So
Mm.
that sort of like happy demeanor that you've got, do you think that is like for saying that, you do so well at races, do you think that's all part and parcel of why you have success in ultras, that you don't take it as seriously as other people, do you think?
I mean, I was a little bit aware of this when I was looking at my um like look for example looking at my own Instagram account and like because it was getting a little bit in my head towards this like the start of the spine races and I was like obviously you see everyone else is coming up and like all the like hardcore gritting it out middle of the night training with the pack and all this. The last one that I think I put up, or at least one of the last posts I put up on Instagram, was the fact that me and my running club did a Greg's Christmas run where we ran round our local Greg's and sang Christmas songs about Greg's, which honestly was so much fun. And also, I'm a little bit aware, doesn't look like the most sensible training for one of Britain's most brutal races. But in my defense, it probably wasn't, but it was a lot of fun. But there is something about like running with joy is really important to me. Like, I get to do this. This is a massive privilege to be able to get out and run. And like, I don't always enjoy it. I've had some real, like, all my friends who get the horrible, like, messages from me when I'm halfway around a race, including in this one where a couple of my friends got the, like, I think a message which just said, this is type 3 fun in the middle of the night. Like, I'm not always super enjoying it, but I always try and make sure that on average, I'm kind of getting everything out of the experience and really valuing being outside, like, say, being in communities. Like, if you don't enjoy it, why are you doing it? It's hard enough, like it just feels like a waste.
Um, so how did that sort of joyful attitude sort of play into this year's race then? Because you guys had the worst of all of the weather, didn't you?
Oh my word. Yeah, I mean I seeing Phil Holiday Brown at the start looking ecstatic about just how bad the snow was. Was like it was seeing the joy on his face. I was like, oh no. We are in for something here. I mean I hugely enjoyed the first bits where it was light and it was like the beautiful dawn, like heading up over the Kinder Plateau and like seeing the Kinder downfall like frozen solid. Like it's unbelievable the stuff you see on these races. Like no one else sees this stuff. You're out there at weird times and seeing, sights that other people just are not going to come across. That is incredible. And I really try and like kind of soak those in because as you start to hit the bits that are a lot less fun, um, it can be really challenging. And I think for me, so Black Hill was horrible. Like Bleaklow is always horrible. So it's kind of a given, but you couldn't even find the main route through the regular path. So you're kind of, post holing through snow around where you knew the path was, but you couldn't find it. Followed by Black Hill, where I literally fell into a hole into a river at one point, just a small river, but didn't love that. And I think on that one I did just quite a lot of like audible like grunting noises probably rather than anything else. But I was still aware. I was this is farcical, but I have brought this on myself. Like I am choosing to do this in my spare time. I will say over I think it's Ixon, I don't know how to pronounce it, Ixon Shaw Moor, the one that's before Cowling. I definitely ran with some people who were losing their sense of humor. And I really, really, really had to hold on to my sense that the dawn was actually going to come. So all night I was lying to myself. So what I will do is if I'm not feeling fully positive, I'd be like, I'm sure it must be nearly 5 o'clock in the morning now. The sun will rise, it'll come up, the birds will sing, we'll get over it. It must have been about 1 in the morning. I kind of knew in my mind I still had a really long time to go on this moor and a really long time to go until it was actually going to get light. But I was just like, the light's going to come, the light's going to come. And I just kept kind of going over that in my head. And eventually it did. But like after we'd gone right over the moor to pretty much Cowling and the Lothersdale Tri Station. Um, but like there was definitely like trying to hold on to that of it's, I might be sitting there thinking, you know what, I don't really want to be here right now. There's lots of other places I'd rather be than slogging across a moor in the middle of the night. But then there is also that's not true, is it? I love doing this stuff, so it will get better again. There will be light again. There will be birds. There'll be people I'm running with who are cheerier, and it will be a really nice experience. But those sections are split up by some really quite hard experiences. And I wouldn't want to underplay that. It was incredibly difficult going and quite unpleasant. Like when you were kind of putting your feet in the holes, the snow was kind of crusted at the top. So you would like bruise your legs where you were kind of, if you didn't get your like footing quite right. So like I came back with like loads of bruises, like lines all the way down my legs of like how deep the snow was. That was pretty unpleasant. And then when you were falling over, it was quite hard to get up again. So it was very energy sapping. And so it's not like I'm kind of constantly positive, like this is fun. Like I'm like, this is horrible, but it will end.
Well, I suppose that is basically the theme of the spine, isn't it? Even in the summer, like regardless of what race you're doing,
Mm,
that is kind of how the race works, isn't it? That you have some horrible moments, don't you? But then the light does come eventually, doesn't it? And that's the thing, and which is obviously like the metaphor for life, isn't it? That
exactly.
life is tough, but there is light at the end of the tunnel, hopefully.
Yeah. And I suppose there's also light as you go along. Like I'm always struck. It is really a metaphor. Like, you can see the head torches of other people who are there. You get a sense of like, that people are watching your tracker. Even in the middle of the night, people are watching your tracker. And so you've got this sense of like, there are lights in the darkness as well. It's not just about the big ending, like, oh, this is great, it's light again. It's actually the fact that it's there as you're going along too, which I find really important. And I think that links to why a lot of people do this stuff. Like the level of kind of sense of that community, especially with spine racers, is incredibly strong.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that is why people keep coming back as well.
Mm.
It's one of those things that I'm trying to remember who it was I was interviewing, and she was sort of saying she'd not done any of the races. Oh, it was Rebecca Devereux who came
Oh, great.
third in the sprint,
Mm.
and she was saying she didn't understand why people keep coming back. Um, but then obviously since she's done the race, she now understands why people keep coming back, even when conditions are as bad as they were for you guys with Challenger South. People still get to the end and go, right, what am I signing up for again?
I know it's wild, isn't it? Like it's kind of fascinating because you're like, could it be anything? Could we be doing anything? And it's kind of no, it kind of has to be that hard and difficult and have that level of sport. Some kind of real sweet spot, I think, with spine races.
Yeah, that is true, isn't it? Yeah, that it's not so hard that the whole field like doesn't finish. Everybody's in,
Exactly.
but it's hard enough that a lot of people don't finish, and then the ones that do are like overjoyed, and even the ones that don't finish, they don't. That's one of those things into the like with Kim Collison, like the
Mm.
fact that he could 3 times start that race and not finish it, and then come back on the fourth time and win it. That just that. What other race like produces performances like that?
Oh, what a legend.
Yeah, it's bizarre, isn't it? That because I still sort of tried to sort of quantify what he's done with that, like the fact that he hasn't, a year I've been going, this is his year, this is his year, and I said it again this year,
Mm.
and part of me was like, really do hope that he does get to the end. Even just get to the end would be great. He
Mm.
doesn't have to win, but then for him to win, he's just like it's just seems like the perfect end to a spine journey. And I know it's obviously not going to be an end to his spine journey, or unless it is, maybe he's just like, I've had enough now, I'm not coming back.
Done it. Completed it, mate.
I completed it. Yeah, so how do you feel then? And we've obviously talked about you sort of being on the podium for all these different races. How do you still how do you still view the race now? Is it still something that you're going to keep coming back and picking different races to do, or how do you feel about it?
I mean, it's interesting. I think that's definitely a question I would have answered differently straight after finishing to now, as I'm sure everyone does. I mean, I'm sure I'll keep coming back, whether that's volunteering, whether that's racing. I definitely want to keep coming back and seeing the spine race. Um, I think for me, it felt like I'm really happy with my performance in that one in a way that I don't usually get because I think I know the conditions were so bad and so difficult. And so for me, there was something there about to be able to achieve a win on something that was that hard is something that I'm kind of it always feels a bit weird when you're kind of proud of yourself in that way, but I don't always get that with races at all. In fact, I haven't got it for well over a year in terms of feeling like, oh, I'm really nailed that one. That was really good because I've done some races in the last year, which I actually found really, really difficult. The Late London 100, for example. I found really challenging. It just rained solidly for like 12 hours overnight, and I was so grumpy. Like my poor friend Andy, who was running with me, like kudos to him because I was having a horrible time on that one. And like and I finished that, but I just wasn't that happy with like my performance or how I'd done with it. So I think, yeah, there's definitely something about this one in particular that I'm really pleased to have done.
Yeah, it's like next level, isn't it?
Mm,
There's winning under conditions that are challenging but not too
mm,
bad. Like to win on a year when the conditions are so bad that there's guys at the front like who who are like outstanding ultra runners that literally are like exhausted and have to give up, and
yeah,
that's the kind of conditions that you're up against. To pull a win in, then it's got to be. Yeah, so what's next then after that then? So are you
resting.
so I'm thinking like logically, we talked about this, didn't we? Like
Mm,
there's obviously you've got like Challenger North
mhm,
to have a go at, if you wanted to have a go at that, and the new Sprint North. But like the experience that you've got now with the races, with those podiums at those distances, and even with the summer race as well that you,
mm.
you pulled in third on that. Are you thinking full winter?
I mean, you can't not think it, can you? Because that is, we all know what the like, it's the big one. I need to really think about it because it is exhausting. I really liked Hannah Rickman's blog about kind of how she found DNFing it and the kind of experience of like feeling that pressure as well because you have to do it for you. You have to this stuff is so hard. You need to be so intrinsically motivated around like this is the right race for me at the right time and I'm prepared to like grit through it and it has to be quite meaningful and you can't let other stuff get in your head. So it's a long-winded answer if I'm still working that out. um, but it's because I've completed the route. So
Mhm.
the summer spine, and I would say the summer spine when I did it was absolutely torrential rain and thunderstorms, and it wasn't a like lovely
No.
bimble across like sun hills. It was I did heat training that was completely pointless. It was like a winter one at certain points. I was wearing a puffer jacket. So so yeah, it was. So I've done the route. So I'd really need a reason for it to be that route in winter, not just that route. And so that's something I need to kind of ponder a little bit.
Yeah. I'd definitely take sub-zero temperatures and snow over torrential rain in the summer.
Yeah, it
Like
was grim.
your feet.
Mainly
No.
the feet. I know we always got to talk about feet. That was
Well,
the main problem on the summer spine. My feet were absolutely destroyed by that, and I definitely don't want to ever do like that kind of destruction to myself again.
yeah, it's next level, wasn't it?
Mm,
Just the perfect storm, as they said, wasn't it? With rain and then heat is just like a horrible. And I think I messed up by wearing when I did Challenger North, and I wore the wrong shoes, even though I
mm,
trained in them. They were just and they were like a half a size bigger. So
mm.
I'd gone, I'd done the thing that I should have done, but maybe they should have been, in hindsight, I should have wore like wide toe box stuff and to allow like my feet to swell and everything. Maybe
Yeah.
got my ultras again instead of the ones I've stuck with. But that's with the spine, you learn, don't you? And I think that is why people. So was it Bobby Cullen
Mm.
saying how he keeps coming back because he does stuff wrong, and then he tries to rectify what he's done wrong, but then ends up doing something else wrong.
I know. I was actually looking at his screenshot of his Excel sheet that he's got of all the different things, and it's like it was so interesting because I was like, yeah, you always think you're like, right, I've solved that thing, and then something completely unexpected and random, and something else comes up, and you're like, oh, I hadn't thought about that, you know. So never boring on those
Yeah.
races.
It's never boring, yeah, and that's obviously why people keep coming back into it because there's always something that's going to go wrong and always something that you can try better the next time. Yeah. What was how did you sort of feel going through 2 nights? When did you finish? So I'm like all of a like blur of what time of day it was when you finished because I'd been awake and stuff. So what it was about 3 in the morning or
It
four.
was, yeah, yeah, you're right. It was about 3 in the morning on the kind of Monday morning.
That was it. Yeah, because
Mm.
I that was it. I went to bed and got up specifically to see you come in.
Oh, nice, thanks.
So yeah, I think yeah, we all are like the media team. I think because there was a bit of a lull. There seemed to be a
Mm,
bit of a lull in the light between who was coming in, and you were like the next. So we probably went to bed at about 11:30, quarter to 12,
mm.
and I set my alarm for like 3 o'clock or something, or it might have been like 2:30 or something. So it's like ridiculous, isn't it? Like setting your alarm for like 2.5 hours sleep.
I mean, it is not in the context of the spine race. Though. I was like, oh, luxury.
Yeah, yeah. 2.5 hours sleep in an actual bed is it's quite a luxury on the race, isn't it? Mm.
But yeah, no. So yeah, that was a full night out, and then obviously, yeah, pretty much another full night out, which I haven't. I was trying to think on the summer one. I think I nearly did that as well. I think but it was definitely the longest I've gone without sleeping on a race for sure. It was definitely that.
Under those conditions as well makes it even more tough. Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
how do you fare with sort of sleep deprivation? Because that's like my favorite one of my favorite subjects. You'll know, obviously, is like hallucinations and stuff. How do you fare?
I know I'm going to really disappoint you here. I don't have
Oh,
hallucinations. Or I
yeah.
haven't yet. I did on the first time I did Challenger South. I had one moment where I tried to step over the white lines in the road as if they were a fence. I just could not work out that it was on the floor. And I'm so glad no one saw me do it because I looked completely mad just in the middle of like some moor somewhere trying to like work out why this fence had suddenly appeared. Um, but in terms of my actual sleep deprivation, I'm quite a bad insomniac. So I think I found the sport where
Really?
that's suddenly like a useful thing, and
Superpower.
I'm quite used to functioning on not as much sleep as you would want, and like
Wow.
not always fully compass mentis, but I don't always sleep very well at all. So it's kind of like, oh yeah, that's fine. But also the adrenaline when you get going in these races
Mm.
like is quite high even all night like that's like a level of focus that you have I think which just stopped me in any way thinking of falling asleep like when we were on this race on the Cam High Road. Charles I was running with really wanted to go to sleep on the Cam High Road and I was like absolutely not, we are not going to sleep on the Cam High Road. But like that was quite interesting because he had just obviously like we'd gone through so much kind of that night and night again that I totally get why you'd want to do that, but there is a certain point where you just think it's probably better just to keep going now actually.
Yeah, because you're within reach, aren't you? When you get,
Exactly.
although it doesn't always feel like that, does it? I know the couple of times I've been on the Cam High Road, it doesn't feel like it's. Sometimes it can feel like you're so close, but then you're
Mm.
so far away from Hawes as well at the same time, aren't you? And I think
Oh
the
god,
best
yeah.
bit is when you come over the top,
Mm.
see the lights of Hawes, can't you? But you're not there.
I know, and I know. I'm really glad I recceed that before the first time I ever did it, because you look on the map and you think, "Oh, that's downhill. That's great. Last couple of miles downhill. I'll be jogging into Horse." No, you won't. It's a disgusting like bog that you'll get with no track on it, which is useful to know when
Literally no track at all, is there?
nothing. There's absolutely nothing. I've been on there now many times. There is definitely no track up there. So you're following your GPX, like trying to find your way down this hill. You can see the lights. You know it's there. You're like the Wensleydale factory or whatever is right there. And it's at least 45 minutes from when you see the lights, if it's good going, to when you're there. And so I don't even know how long it must have been for us. It must have been well over an hour. Awful.
Yeah. Yeah, it's terrible. I know, like on last year on the full. that was the point that I was the so I think the this wasn't particularly sleep deprivation. I think it was the cold and the lack of calories. I'd sort of run out of food, but I knew that you could see that you were so close to Hawes. I was thinking it's I can make it. It's fine. But I remember getting so cold, and
Yeah.
I was fortunate that I was with somebody, and they were coming like, "You come on, you've got to get moving. Don't slow down. Don't you know?" I was like swapping gloves and
Mm.
coats, things like that, trying to get warm, and I just couldn't get warm at all. It's just a combination of those couple of things. But it's amazing, like when you actually get to the checkpoint, how you can, because you seem like you were like absolutely like fresh as a daisy when you came in. Did it feel like that?
It was the absolute excitement of not being on that bit. I think that is what that bit does, which is like as soon as you hit the bit where you're actually on the road, and that little bit where there's like a tiny Pennine Way sign just to make you miss it, just as you go down towards Halls itself. Like when you hit that road, you know you're nearly there. I mean, obviously, it still then goes through a load of extra fields, like some ginnels, some little extra bits. Just that last icy uphill and downhill, I was like, oh my god, it just does not end. Um, but yeah, you're not on the horrible descent down to Hawes. So that really does make a difference, I think, in feeling joyful about it. And also it was so nice seeing people like Tom, obviously,
Yeah, yeah.
hiking hairdresser Tom. Like people who because I hadn't seen him yet. I'd seen a few of the other people in the media team and like I was like, oh, that's amazing. Obviously my parents, and it was just like and people who I knew, like it was so nice. It's like, oh, human beings, civilization, warmth, you know.
All of those things you've been craving.
Yeah,
Right. Give me a second. I've just got to pause while there's a cat trying to get into the room and he's like
amazing.
scratching and meowing, and I need to sort him out. Give me a sec.
Yeah, no worries.
And we're back.
Excellent.
The cats. We've got two cats, and they're both freaking out because it's so windy.
Oh yeah.
Not particularly. They don't really understand what's going on, and they're like running around the house, meowing and scratching at doors and stuff.
Oh
So
bless him. They're just like, why can't you turn this off? Why are you not turning off the wind? We're asking you to.
yeah, meow. I don't understand what that meow is. Yeah. Um. Oh, and he's back. Yeah,
Oh,
he's coming. Yeah, so he's yeah.
amazing.
So I put him outside, but he's actually come back in again.
I don't blame him.
Yeah. Okay, meow. It's fine. Just be quiet. I'd say I'd edit this out, but I never really edit anything.
It's good to have a bit of extra context.
Very true. Very true. So what is the plan then for the rest of the year? Are you got your sights set on anything else? Are you going to be doing any of the summer races or?
So yeah, so this year, so I've actually deliberately left it quite empty because last year was slammed. So I started with the sprint, but I also had Lakeland 100 and I had the Dragons back last year. So there were some really big focuses, and that's great. I'm glad I did it. But this year, I was like, within that, there was also like almost every month I had an ultra for like testing myself, saying I was doing like some local races, some kind of bigger ones, and I was like, this is fine, but I'm kind of feeling a little bit like I have to do some of these as part of my training because Dragon's Back is such a beast and it's so terrifying. Um, and so this year, I've purposely not put loads of stuff into my diary so that I can kind of see what comes up a little bit more. So I have got, saying that, I have got some stuff in. I'm doing some local races. Once again, Punk Panther. I'm going back to do the Welcome Way because actually it's a great route. And in fact, I'm hopefully taking one of my friends for their first ultra to do that. I have warned them that it's the name of the way. So I've got some Punk Panther ones. I'm doing the lap, the Windermere lap, because I really like that route. And then hopefully the Hardmoors 110 will be one, which is a race that I have unfinished business on.
Oh, right.
Because yeah, so I finished it, but it was one of my first big ultras, and I it's fair to say I messed up my nutrition and I death marched in for 8 hours at the end of it over the Cleveland Hills, and they're really beautiful, and it was
Yeah.
really horrible. So this time I want to my genuine only ambition for that race is to enjoy it. It's such a beautiful route. It's such a great race series and I really do not want to hate it. And I also have in November I'm doing God's Own Backyard Ultra here in Leeds with some friends because we did it last November and it was really good fun. So some people from who I run with kind of locally are all going to kind of come together and do that. But that is definitely backyard ultras are not my thing, but I really enjoy the community side of it.
Yeah, yeah, fair enough. Yeah. Um, what's been your sort of approach to training then? Because obviously you came into the sport and relatively quickly you had, a lot of success, getting yourself on podiums at big races. How, are you self-coached? Are you coached? How do you sort of structure your training? And is it all, based around running around Greg's and stuff, or is there like actually is there some serious workouts?
Giving away my secrets. I did. By the way, I did miss something I'm doing this year, which I should actually mention, which is I've decided to go like self-guided adventures. So I want to do the Frog Graham. So that's the
Yeah.
40 miles plus swimming in the
Yeah.
Lake District. So I've actually been trying to do some swimming as a slightly different sport. So I should mention that because two of my friends have offered to help me with that, Andy and Lance, and so it's making the shout out of like we are going to do that. Anyway, back to my training. A horrifying amount of it is actually running to Greg's. Or like running to somewhere that's like has snacks. So I do a lot of like long slow runs. I tend to get out pretty much every day and do something. I do have days off where I'll do like cross training or swimming. But I do tend to have relatively high volume, I would say. But I'm also a this is one where when people see me trashed after an ultra, they're like, "Are you?" But I'm actually a speedy run leader at Leeds Dock Running Club. So we do every Monday we do a 7K. Look us up on Instagram. We also do a 5K and a 3K. But we do a 7K that's done pretty fast. And so that's my one bit of speed training a week is that I have to not be dropped by the group that I'm meant to be leading.
Yeah.
So I will do that. But a lot of what I do is just like long, fun days out. I go out with friends with recce routes for the running club, for example, or just find a route that we want to do and have a bit of a day out. And I try not to make it feel too much like training. I don't have a coach. I did for the summer spine. Get a guy called Nathan Montague to help me out with, as I was saying, heat training, which turned out to be
Pointless.
yeah, totally pointless. The weather broke on the first day, and it was complete thunderstorms. But as part of that, he talked to me a bit about the psychology of racing as well, which was so valuable. So he was the one who was kind of talking about, thinking about what can I do. And my favorite bit of advice, which was have one ridiculous thing that you want to eat, which you cannot be grumpy while eating. So mine was dib dabs. You cannot be grumpy while eating a dib dab. You just feel ridiculous. So it's like genuinely excellent advice because I also sometimes carry stuff like happy hippos or party rings or something that's just fundamentally daft. Because if you're being grumpy on a moor in the middle of the night and you pull out a packet of party rings, you really have to be like taking yourself very seriously to carry on being that grumpy. So like stuff like that was really useful. And he was great, but I don't struggle to get out the door and do like go for a run. So I don't really need that kind of accountability side of coaching, although I'm absolutely sure I would benefit from more coaching advice. And I have friends who are running coaches, and I usually try and tap them up when we're on a run for advice without paying them, but I will. And so I look at kind of what kind of training theory is. I read books about it, I listen to podcasts about it. I try and keep up to date with the latest scientific side of it, which is much less, not so obvious from what anything I put online. But I am really interested in where that's going and trying to apply that to myself. But no, I don't have a coach, and my training tends to be just quite consistent, high volume with a little bit of speed.
Yeah. What sort of mileage? Is it by mileage or is it by hours or
It
time?
kind of really depends actually, because it depends if I know, for example, if I'm like up in the lake seeing my parents, it will be probably hours because like the mileage is almost irrelevant. A half marathon could take you as long as an ultra on some of those routes. It tends to be around, well, usually at least about 100K a week. Like it is high volume. Like this is absolutely, I would not recommend this. There are certain bits of training I would do. I would definitely not recommend if you've not been running. And I did run high volume a lot, even before I started doing ultras, high volume, like running and walking because like I say, I really enjoy it and I get out quite a lot. But I run a lot of them really slow, so it's slow. I stop and take photos. I might go to Greg's, but I will stop and do things on the way. I don't force myself to keep to a certain pace. Otherwise, I think that would just be heading towards injury.
Yeah, that's really, really wise training that is. And I suppose if you're sort of in the routine of just being out most
Mhm.
days, and then you throw in a regular speed workout, that is almost like perfect training, isn't it? Because you're not worrying about consistency because it's already there. You've got a speed workout. Yeah, that sounds like a really like logical approach to And it doesn't sound like it's stressful at all because there's nothing worse than stressing about your training, is there? Like thinking you've got to do something. How did you sort of factor in like specific race specific stuff then? So how did you work in like did you have recce weekends, that kind of thing?
Yeah, so I definitely have recce weekends. And just going back to what you said about the kind of consistency side of it, being in running clubs massively helps. So I'm in two, so lead stock runners and Saltire Striders. And so like every Monday I'll be at Leeds Dock, every Thursday I'll be at Saltire Striders. On Wednesdays, Striders do track and Leeds Dock do like intervals or hill reps. So there's these training things like already set up in my week. So it's no effort. I'm going out, I'm seeing my friends, I'm having a chat. I don't even think about the fact that's running. Um, so that's certainly one side of it. And I have already forgotten what your actual question was.
I think I have as well.
We were talking about training and
Consistency.
consistency.
Recce's, how?
Recce's, that was it. Yes. So yeah, so it's specific training for the races. Yes. So I do especially with this one recently, I did go out with my friend Andy and my friend Max, and we've done quite a few recce's of bits of the course just to see what it was like at the moment. Completely pointless again, as with all spy races, because then it was completely blanketed in snow. But doing things like Three Peaks, did Three Peaks just before Christmas as kind of just to get a bit of sense of, get that landscape in your legs and get a bit of a feel for like, running on flagstones and running in bogs and all that kind of stuff. But it's quite handy for me because I'm quite near Ilkley Moor. So getting out there, and it's got the flagstones, it's got bogs you can fall in, it's got, everything you could need. Some nice gradual uphills to train on. So I do some specific stuff. I do like to recce a course, just so I know what I'm dealing with. And it certainly is more of a challenge. I tend to do courses in the north of England. It certainly was a challenge on the Dragon's Back that I hadn't seen some of the areas before. And I kind of wish I had recce'd a bit more of that one.
Yeah, are there any races that you sort of is on your list to do that you haven't done yet, sort of thing, but you're gonna sort of work them into the next few years?
Yeah, I have a list on my phone which is just called Adventures. It's getting longer and longer. I was talking to a friend today actually about the Arc of Attrition looks pretty cool, but obviously it's very close to as you call it, Spinemas. So
Yeah.
it's like, can you do both? I think that would probably
Yeah,
be too
you'd have
much.
to pick. You'd have to pick. Mm.
Yeah, no. So that's definitely one. Obviously, the big like Tour de Géant type stuff looks amazing. And then Race Across Scotland looks really cool. The one I'm less interested in is Cape Wrath, which people keep saying, "Oh, you'd love that," and I'm like, I don't know. That's 8 days. That feels a lot. I was like, it's Tussocky and there's no route. I'm like, oh yeah, selling it. But things like that kind of you just have in the back of your mind of like that would be interesting. I'd love to do a Bob Graham. I haven't. I've recce'd that, but I haven't done one. And so yeah, there's a few like that which I think. But yeah, if I got my phone, honestly, the list is so long. Every time I see like a new ultra that's come out, and I'm like, oh, I'd like to do that as well. But that's why I don't want to stack my calendar. So it's kind of, oh, Northern Traverse, that's another one. But so things like that where I'm just keeping a bit of an eye out, but I don't want to do so many huge ones every year. And like this year, because I've got two, obviously with the one that's just gone and the Hardmoors 110, 200 milers in there already. I don't really want to stack something else on top of that at the moment.
Yeah. And you mentioned the Frog Graham, so a couple of my mates have done it. So they did it,
Oh, fab.
it was last summer. I think last summer they did it. Yeah, and they thoroughly enjoyed it. But one of them he'd already done a bob anyway.
Mhm.
So he'd done a bob and it was and I'm not sure why he decided he wanted to do a frog because he's not really. And one of them is he swims, he does triathlon, but the other one, he yeah, I'm surprised that he wanted to sort of do that, that it was with the swimming involved. Yeah, logistically, how do you sort of go about organizing that?
Well, at the moment, it's a WhatsApp group. so
Oh,
we'll find out as we head towards summer. So basically, I have some friends who are handily really good swimmers, who I also run with and are in my running club. So I've got my kind of swim support, which is fantastic. And then I also have some friends who are really good runners. So I was kind of trying to bring those together and work out like, different routes. So far I've got about as far as setting up a WhatsApp group and buying the Harvey's map and also actually training myself to do some swimming because I really love swimming outside and swimming in lakes and things like that. But I've never thought, I've never kind of gone one side to another. So there's definitely a bit there around like practicing like outdoor swimming when it gets warmer though, because I am a wuss and it is definitely too cold for that.
Yeah. I wouldn't describe you as a wuss, push back.
It's too far for me.
But is that something that you sort of do in your training anyway, swimming? Is that sort of cross training that you have in your training week to week?
Yeah, it's so I have a friend called Lance who his Insta thing is River Voyagers and he's in my running club, but he also does
Followed it.
it.
I think I followed him. Yes, I followed him.
Yes.
The page.
Yes. So he does an kind of activity of swimming up and down rivers, which is really cool. And so I've been on a couple of swims with him, not up and down rivers because I'm not that good, but I was like, oh, this is quite cool. But also my technique is absolutely horrible. So I've kind of started learning a little bit more about like technique and kind of that side of it because I'll be honest, and Lance doesn't listen to podcasts, so I won't hear this, but swimming is not as good as running. Like they're kidding themselves. It's not as good. So
That's
I would rather be out and running, but I like the technical side of it because that keeps me in the pool, like trying to practice my stroke, trying to get better at that because I don't really have that to the same degree in running anymore. I've kind of refined. I mean, my form and everything is not perfect, but I've got close enough that I'm not bothered about it. But swimming, I still have a long way to go.
yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because before getting into ultras, I sort of built my way up from half marathons and then doing triathlons,
Ah,
and I've done two full distance, so not Ironman, but Ironman distance. So
mm.
Outlaw, the one at Nottingham, we did that a couple of years,
Oh, cool.
and that was like the biggest breakthrough was learning to swim properly. So you
Mm.
you think that you can swim, don't you? You grow up thinking, yeah, I can swim, and then you actually like get in a pool and start swimming, and you're like, okay, yeah, I'm absolutely knackered after like 2 minutes. How am I going to swim 2.4 miles? Um, and a mate of mine was just like, just watch YouTube tutorials on technique, and then it'll make sense. And that was it. So like, just sat down and watched a load of videos, and then just took it in the pool and realized that you just flapping your arms around and making loads of splash isn't efficient.
It's so disappointing that it isn't.
It's not about the effort, it's about the technique. Yes, definitely about the technique. But how did you get on with like open water swim? Because that was terrifying the first time I ever did that. Like putting your face in just into blackness.
Yeah, I have to say, that wasn't a problem till I got goggles. So, prior to that, I was like, oh, this is fine. Like I was like, I don't really have a problem with that. And then I got goggles. I'm like, oh, you can see the stuff down there. Did you know that? It's like
Fish and
weed.
stuff.
So yeah, I don't love putting my face in the water. But it's yeah, I really enjoy it because once again, it's the surroundings. If you go somewhere like a tarn or a lake and you've got the kind of beautiful surroundings around you, that makes a real difference.
Yeah, yeah, amazing. Yeah. So when are you planning on doing that then? In the when the water's warmed up
when,
nicely?
when it's warm and warm that people who don't swim in winter think is warm. That's basically where I want to get to. So yeah, so like I say, it's hopefully that's something I'll do this summer, but it's those kind of adventures I want to leave a little bit of a gap for rather than just constantly be doing like ultras. It's the kind of self-guided with mates kind of adventures that I'm looking forward to doing a lot more of this year.
Fair enough. Um, what's your opinion on there was a lot of hype around the women's race this year in all the races and everything. What's your take? Because I sort of come into the spine family, sort of being aware of the fact that the women's running is always been sort of celebrated in the spine. So that's one thing that I really picked up on. But this year there was a lot of attention on the women's race. What's your sort of take on all of that?
I mean, what a phenomenal group of women. Like absolute like fangirling all over the place. Mel Sykes actually came to wave to me at Wessendon Head after she'd registered. She came and waved briefly at me and then obviously went back to do the race. I was like, oh my God. I was so like touched by that. So they are phenomenal women. They're all really open. They're happy to share advice. They're phenomenal. And I think it is important that we obviously recognize women's races, especially something this difficult like this. These are the kind of races where people kind of say to me, oh, you're out on your own, you're out in the dark, is and there's this implicit thing of like, I kind of there's a risk that races like this could really sell themselves and other races do sell themselves on like, this is tough, this is really hard. I mean, it's called Britain's Most Brutal, but it doesn't pitch it on that like hyper masculine, like, grit through it, pain cave like stuff to the same degree as some of the other ones. it is about like the fact that it foregrounds community support, every runner matters, the fact that it's from the front to the back, the fact there's all this safety, like it's so many safety teams. That's vital. There's always someone watching your tracker. There's safety and support. There's people around. There's all these aspects that I think like weirdly lends itself, well, not weirdly at all actually, but like lends itself quite well to like women doing well in it. I still think there's the women's field. I'm not the first person to say this. I'm probably not the first person to say this on your podcast, I think, actually. But like the women's field could still be longer. Like there are still notably less women than there
Mm.
are men doing this race. And I think that is for a number of reasons, which people like She Racers have gone through and kind of identified exactly why that is. And there's a lot of barriers in terms of like women will often wait until they are really confident they're going to complete something, or that they've done all the experience, they've got all the training before they will go out and then actually do the race. And I think it was like Ali Bailey talking about the fact it's not just about having sanitary products in your like aid stations. It's actually a whole kind of systemic thinking about like what do women need. And so I think it's hugely important that women were foregrounded in this way this year. And I was really pleased. I think it was your podcast where you kind of said, "Oh, we're going to really be focusing on the women's race." And I was like, yeah, I think that's a really good call. And it's interesting because I think I don't know where it came from, but there was a mention of kind of criticism of last year when it was very the men's field was absolutely stacked. And so loads of pictures of like, the front 11 men, like, that was the kind of takeaway image from this. And I think this year, like Kim Collison has done a phenomenal job, and it will definitely be Kim's year, like forever, like well done. But like Lucy Gossage and her story, and the women at the front of that race, the support they gave each other, those videos, like seeing her and Robin Cassidy interact with each other, and all of that, like that is the story that will kind of hopefully really stay and really resonate with people. So, like I said, I'm doing spine races because of Jasmine Paris. Like, and that was when I was talking to my coach about like psychology of it. He was like, "Why do you want to do a spine race?" And I was like, it's because that this, Jasmine Paris held the record and beat that record in such a phenomenal way. And like she is absolutely extraordinary. But it showed me, I was like, actually, women can do really difficult, really hard things, absolutely smash it, do it incredibly well. And that's such an important part of the story of this race and this route as well. Like, so it's something I feel, I mean, as you can probably tell, something I feel very passionately about in terms of making sure that women do get equal kind of billing in this stuff. And I'm loving the stories that Tom's doing at the moment of like the girl gang and like the girl
Well,
band. It's so cool. And like kind of highlighting all those individual stories as well, because they are some of the most phenomenal athletes in the UK. And it's fantastic to see them getting the kudos and the credit that they deserve.
yeah, yeah, absolutely, yeah. Um, so what sort of advice would you give somebody getting into ultras then, with your experience of spine races and stuff? If there's people that have been inspired this year by seeing the coverage of the women's races, what sort of advice could you sort of give them?
I think there's probably some basic ones like if you're not in a running club, go and join a running club. Like because firstly, it's dark and a bit rubbish at the moment. I don't want to go running, even if I do feel safe, because it's rubbish in the evenings. Like, find other people to go running with. That's really, really good. I think the other thing is practice your eating. This is advice for everyone. Practice your eating. It makes everything a lot better. And it's also a particular issue sometimes for women because you have this idea of, like it's kind of funny, but we're not seen as like people who like eat loads, or like if you're thinking about food, it's often related to kind of diet and kind of disordered thinking about food. Whereas in fact, like, go and buy Rennie McGregor's book, like go and find out about like decent nutrition. You will need to eat a lot more. You will need to make sure that you're like fueling yourself, and thinking of it as something like that is going to be quite a different mindset and mentality. But I think a lot of it is just don't think you can't do it. Like this is something where you might not do it first time. You've seen lots of people don't do it first time. You will always have a phenomenal experience. Things like a spine race, you will not regret towing the start line. It's well worth like trying to do it. And it's like I say, it doesn't matter if you come last, doesn't matter if you think you're slow, that like everyone will be behind you and supporting you in doing that. And also like hopefully fairly obviously, if you want to reach out to me and have any conversations about like what kit I use, what I like to eat, like my advice and kind of how things work for me, I'm really happy to have conversations with people as well. But there's loads of blogs out there. Read Hannah Rickman's blog would also be the other one of like she really puts stuff down so well. So have a little read of that. And get a bit of a sense of like kind of what you're doing. But why it just start thinking like, why not? What if you could do it? Like go for that. Like don't keep thinking of barriers. Think of like how you can actually respond and kind of get the best experiences for you.
Yeah, I think and being around the race as well, like volunteering and stuff, you realize you see people, don't you? And you realize that they're just people on there that have
Yeah.
tried. People that, they gave it a go, had a shot, and nine times out of ten it works out. But I can't think of anyone that's been around the race and volunteered and helped out in some way or another that has then done the race that is like really regretted it because it doesn't work
Yeah.
like that. But
No, absolutely doesn't. I think and it's not just that race. There's loads around, lots of local races are really supportive. So with Punk Panther, one of the things that they do is they always have a back marker. So there's always someone behind, but they're also in the results. You will never be last because they are literally in the official results as the last person. So it makes sure that everyone can finish when they want to. It's not about feeling pressure for that, if that's something that's stopping you. So it is worth looking out for kind of those opportunities to kind of try yourself because honestly, you won't regret it. And if you do, there's other sports. You can go do something else. That's also fine. You don't have to like it.
amazing. Well, that's three mentions of Punk Panther, so we're gonna have to include them
Yeah, sorry. It just
in the
they are
post.
the first one I did. They are fantastic.
We'll make sure we tag them in all the posts about it. Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Alice. I appreciate you sort of coming on and giving you time, and I know that you do listen to the podcast, so I do hope that you listen back to it. You should listen back to
Oh,
it.
thanks. I'll be like, oh, I should have said this. I should have said this. Yeah, no, I really
Save it
appreciate
for the
coming
next.
on.
Yeah,
Yeah.
save it for the next interview after your podium at the full winter.
Might be a while then. No, really appreciate it, Sam. Thanks. And it's great to see, I said this to you face to face, but I think your podcast and your kind of brand with Home Trails is doing something quite different. And it's really good to see that in the kind of UK ultra running space because I think we deserve good media. So thanks for providing it.
Oh, no problem. Yeah, cheers for that. Thank you. Yeah, and you're officially, unofficially like the first Home Trails ambassador, whether you like it or not. Because
Oh, absolutely. Down with it. I would have worn my hoodie, but it's still washing from taking it out to a backyard ultra to crew one of my friends at the weekend. But yeah, I will be wearing that.
I'll keep sending you stuff. Don't worry.
Very much appreciated.
Thanks, Alice. Appreciate you coming on. Thanks for listening, everyone. Cheers. Bye 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 bye.